I was born in Berlin during World War II in March 1941. My father was an employee with a aviation company at this time, and my mother was a nurse at a children's hospital. Uh, uh, when my father went to the military, my mother went to Eastern Germany, where her parents, my grandparents, lived. And there we stayed until 45 when the Russians came. So, and then we came to Bavaria, where I grew up. When I grew up, it was after the end of World War II, and especially in Germany, things were very scarce. So, and many things that are existing now didn't exist. There were no computers, was no television, there was only radio and newspapers for information. And sometimes, if you went to a cinema, there was a weekly review of some events in outside world. Like I remember the War of Korea. You got some pictures of soldiers attacking, and the first time I remember we had no home, and we had to rebuild one, and we had not many clothes. We always wore lederhosen and ran barefoot, and but we grew up quite well. Hence, let's say it was when I going to the first years of high school. I had to get up at about 6 because the train leading to the bigger town where the high school was located was leaving at about 6:30. And I arrived there at about 7 with the train and had to walk for a quarter of an hour to the school, and then the school started at 8 normally, so we were in a little room where we could wait until the school started. And mostly we in the first years we made, when we were in the train, we played cards, or we played hiding even in the trains when the compartment was empty with other passengers. We one was blindfolded and had to search the others, and we hid in the under the benches or in the nets for the baggage, and until the conductor came and forbade us to do this, but normally he didn't come. And, so, and when he came, we were sitting on the places, but we did no damage, I think. So, and the school ended normally at 1, and then I had to walk back to the railway station, and came back at 1:30, and then when I was at home, it was 1:45, and then I got a lunch made by my grandmother, because my mother was working, and my father in this time too, they had a company that was growing, and my grandmother did the household at this time. And in the afternoon I did some homework, but I always finished rather fast. So, and very often I was employed by my father to help in his company, and he was producing bags for toiletry, and many of these bags had to be packed in boxes, and I had to do this, or I had to in the first time he had no boxes, so we went to the grocers of the city. So there were still small grocers, not big grocery shops like today, and asked them for the boxes they were no longer using. So, and we had to use these boxes. And I think in the 50s we had the first car then, but before we had to go with a small car pulled by hand and to collect these boxes. And one chore I always hated was to take a milk can and go to one of the farmers to get some some quarts of milk
Yeah.
for the family. And I always wanted my brother to do this, who was 3 years younger than I, that he should do this once too. But I always was loaded with this thing, and I had to go to bed quite early, and I think at between 7 and 8, and sometimes in the summer it was still quite bright outside.
Yeah.
But I can't remember what we played at this time. So when I had free time, I always read something. I was always reading when I got free time, and I did not do much sports at this time. Nobody showed me how to do it, and later when I was growing up, we had a small artificial lake but I could not swim until I was 16, and and the first things I remember is the time after of 45, following 45, after World War II in Germany, and the things were very scarce at this time, but it became better during the time after the war. But nevertheless, the world has changed very much since then. First, I think, is the abundance of things that was not existing at this time. There are many articles, especially of plastics, that didn't exist at all. So plastics was a very rare. There was only plexiglass, and it was very, very rare. Other things is the traffic, of course. There were very few cars, mostly public transport, some buses, and the railways were still drawn by steam locomotives, and the small farmers in our small town had mostly not tractors, only some of them, and the tractors were quite small compared to those of today, and many of them had horses. For the horses there was even still a blacksmith to make their horseshoes, and some of them not only had cows to pull their carts to the fields. The information technology we are having today was not there. There were only newspapers and books, of course, to read, and radio news, and sometimes news at the cinema, for weekly news at the cinema. I remember to have seen some of the Korean War in the 50s, and where the American soldiers were attacking the Chinese and North Korean soldiers, but there was no personal computer, there was no personal phone, there was no personal music player, and all the things, there was no internet at all, there were not even big computers, and especially the information technology I followed later during my education at the university in all stadiums, but that's a complete different story. To primary school in 1947, and we still learned to write on plates of
chalkboard?
Yes.
Or stone?
Stone plates, yes. But as the stones were very rare, they were made of cardboard, and I remember that I could not write very well on them. But I was, I think, quite a good student, and came to a high school in 1951 when I was 10 years old, stayed at high school till 1960 for 9 years, and then graduated, and afterwards I served at the military for 1.5 years, and then I studied at the University of Munich, started studying physics. I graduated with a diploma, which is comparable to a master's degree in when was it? About 62 I started, 1967 or 8, I can't remember. And then I became an assistant professor at the university and supervising students and assisting the professor in lectures and also devising some tests for the students, and also pursued my doctorate at the same time, and I promoted to doctorate in 1971, I think. So I made very long studies, which are not usual anymore today. So I had the time, and then. As I told already, I first was a teacher at the university until 1980. In 1980, I changed to a company where I became what is kind of a development engineer.
Yeah.
It was more engineering than physics, but always applying physical principles for the design and engineering. But I also had been writing programs and software already during my studies, so I also wrote software there and developed measurement devices for very special purposes. The purpose was to sort banknotes in different classes and to recognize their properties.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting thing I invented is a special imaging device that consists of cylindrical lenses and of a retroreflector. A linear retroreflector consists of roofs of 90 degrees prismas placed side by side, and it can image only perpendicular to the direction of these grooves there. A cylindrical lens on the other side also can make an image across its direction, and if we put two cylindrical lenses and retroreflector in the right arrangement, which means that the direction of the retroreflector is perpendicular to the long axis of the cylinders, then we can image a whole line of points into another line of points, and we can make an image of a line which is can be combined into a complete image if you move an object past this line. So. So I think the person who influenced my life most was my grandfather, my mother's father, because my father was not there when I was a small child, and he was a teacher himself.
Yeah.
And he always applied teaching principles to me, so I learned how to read and to read numbers already before I came to primary school. So therefore everything was easy for me at that school. And he also taught me to be curious about everything and to love the nature, what he did very much himself, and to look at every plant. And I remember I was not allowed to carry away plants because he wanted to protect them. I had a cousin who was 19 when he had an accident in the mountains and died from this, and this was of course a remote thing, but my parents had it was in Austria, and he was cremated there, and his urn was sent by mail to a post office in a town in the large town, because it had to go through the customs somehow. And my parents drove there, and they had flowers in the trunk of their car, and I did not understand this. And then they put some parcel into the trunk of this car, and only then I learned that this was the ashes of my cousin who was dead. And so it scared me at this time, really. And
do you remember what happened to him?
Yes, he was searching for certain flowers which are very rare, called Edelweiss in German, and he wanted to bring them to a girl he was loving, and in search of this Edelweiss he fell down a steep wall and died.
That's sad.
It's sad, yes. So my cousins and I, we always went skiing during the break around Christmas to the Alps, to a cottage run by the Alpine Club. And the patron had a big sleigh there, pulled by mules for his supply. And in the cottage there were people of Munich, boys of Munich, who were much more self-conscious than we were, and whom we admired as from the big town compared to our little one. And they once proposed that we took this sleigh running down a hill, and we did this in the evening, and hit the only rock that was down this hill, and the sleigh was heavily damaged. And we returned it to the cottage, and the problem was now the cottage closed at 10 because the Alpine Club rules demanded this, and we could not enter anymore, and we had damaged the sleigh, so we could not knock and to let in. So in the group there was one girl of Munich, and she told us that her dormitory was on the backside of the cottage, leaning to the mountain, and we could possibly enter over the roof into this dormitory. And we did this, but I think we made so much noise that the patron heard it, and when my cousin came out of the girls' dormitory and wanted to run to ours, the patron came after him swinging a chain and hitting him into the back. And my brother and I remember, we crept under the girls' beds, and where a thick layer of dust was lying, and hid there until the patron had gone. And then we ran also to the dormitory where we all had been sleeping. So, but on the next day, the patron had detected that his sleigh was broken, and he found us guilty for this, and we were expelled from the cottage at the same day and had to find another place to stay.
Schade.
Ich glaube, es war ein bisschen besser jetzt.
Ja.
Ja.